Well, g'day everyone and welcome to the Crow's Nest Hotel in Sydney. It's a pleasure to be joined by ESPN's Brett Okamoto. Brett, thanks for stopping in on the way here in Sydney on the way to Perth. Promises only one more flight to go, mate. You're almost there.
Just a very short trip over the pond, yeah, and 5 more hours to Perth. It is a trek, but it'll be good.
Yeah, I think everyone, certainly down here in Australia, has been looking forward to this for some time. We've had no fights down here for the course of the pandemic. 2019, the last time at Oceania and Whitaker. We've got this one in Perth. It's an absolute bell ringer. Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev, the two pound for pound ranked fighters in the world. But then Islam says it hasn't really been marketed to the UFC world much outside Australia. Do you agree with that? Does this fight have the billing that it does here in Australia?
No, it has not been. Every now and then when the UFC really tries to put its promotional might behind a card, you can definitely feel that. That has not been the case yet for this one, but I think that's, frankly, I think it's because of the personalities involved, and that's nothing against either of these guys. They don't do sort of the normal kind of traditional things that you can go collect a bunch of sound bites and throw out to people. So I think the UFC, they know what they're doing. They know how to promote fights, and I think that in this particular one, like, this fight is going to promote itself just in terms of how great the fighters are. So that's kind of a conversation you have the week of. If there was some drama to talk about, if there was some Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, reality TV stuff, because they just got named as the tough coaches, then you can add like a bunch of time to promoting this. But with these two guys, you just talk about how great they are. And I think it's one of those fights where fight week is where you're going to see the buzz go from like this to it's going to jump up.
So much of this build-up has been around Islam's wrestling, and that Alex is not going to be able to handle that. He won't have an answer for what is, just a superior grappling and ground game, isn't it? Do you see it exactly like that? Is there a bit of subterfuge here that Islam might come out and try something different, or is this exactly as we think it will be?
Well, I think you can't say that these two are the number 1 and number 2 pound for pound fighters in the world and then boil it down to one thing in the fight. If Islam can take you down and hold you down and submit you, he's shown over the course of his career he's going to do that. I don't think that that's a situation that's unique to Volk or unique to this matchup. Once Islam gets a guy down, he's one of those guys that not only is a fantastic wrestler with like getting the fight to the floor, but then keeping it there. You see other guys that they're very great at taking a guy down, but then they can't hold him down and they lose energy. Like, Islam takes you down and you're just done. And especially when you add in the fact that Alex is a smaller guy coming up in weight. Of course, that's what a lot of the pre-fight talk is about. And I think that's appropriate. It is appropriate. If Alex can't stop the takedowns, he's going to lose. And you can say that about anybody that Islam fights. But if Alex can stop the takedowns, or make him work really hard to get them, then Alex just has fight IQ. Like Alex is just one of those guys. That's why he's the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world. He just checks every single box, like prep, fight IQ, speed, confidence. He just got everything going for him. So this is obviously a very tough task for him. Like, he is the underdog, which is insane to say just because of the run he's on. But I think it is a good place to start the conversation, because if he can stop the takedowns, all of us are going to be like, ooh, what is this going to look like now?
Fight on. Yeah. Obviously, Alex was able to get out of some pretty hairy positions against Brian Ortega there a couple of years ago. Obviously, would take a lot of confidence from that. But you're saying that clearly Islam's wrestling is at another level from what Brian Ortega's is. And when those positions that Alex was able to get out of in the Brian fight, in the Ortega fight, he's not going to be able to this time around.
We'll find out. That's why they do it. But yeah, Brian has never even been known as a phenomenal wrestler. He's a guy that you think you're safe, and then all of a sudden you're not safe because it's in a scramble. It's like he makes something out of nothing. Islam knows what he's doing. Islam's like, I'm going to take you down, and not many people have been able to stop it. So can Alex stop it? He's the smaller guy. He has not fought, I don't think. I wouldn't put Brian Ortega anywhere close to Islam, and that's not like a diss on Brian. I just think it's a different style thing. We haven't seen, I don't think, Volk fight a wrestler. I know we haven't seen it because Islam is kind of in a tier of his own. Level. So, I don't think you can compare the two. But I'm not willing to just say like that's what's going to happen. Islam's going to take him down. Like, Volk has earned the right for none of us to doubt him. You know what I mean? Like, he's been so great that he's earned that right a bit of just like, no, man, maybe he can stop the takedown. So we'll find out.
That doubt has been a central theme for Volk. He's almost fed off it in every fight certainly here in Australia, he's loved and adored, and one of our top athletes across any sport across the board. But he's always fed off the haters out there in other parts of the world, I think. Did he finally quiet those? You're just meeting one of our locals here, the Flyers. Did he finally quiet that in the Max Holloway from an international, I guess, fight fan perspective? That hang on, this Alexander Volkanovski is the real deal.
He did, but then he did a very Alexander Volkanovski thing by then pointing at the toughest guy in the sport right now. Like had he stayed in his division, there would be no doubts. I mean, people would be like, oh, if he's fighting Yair Rodriguez, he's fighting Josh Emmett. Like let's see. I mean, anybody's beatable. But we would all be saying Alex is the clear favorite. I think he erased any doubts whatsoever that he is elite. He is. I mean, he's the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. I think a lot of people consensusly say that. They're like, this is the guy who's at the top of the sport right now. But when all of a sudden you can be the top guy, but then you still go and point your finger at the biggest challenge in the world. I mean, Islam Makhachev has kind of replaced Khabib Nurmagomedov in a lot of ways, and if Islam wins this fight, he's going to be basically looked at as the same way that Khabib was being looked at. Like, who is going to beat this guy? This guy is just a massive favorite over everybody he takes on because of his skill set. So I don't think there's really any. Alex likes to have doubt. I mean, there are people in the UFC, people within his own camp. They're like, really, you want to go up and do this right now? Like we don't need to go do this right now. But I think, to your point, man, he likes that. He likes that feeling of people saying, like, man, this is too much for him.
Talk to us a little bit more, Brett, if you can, around the technique side of wrestling, because it's not a massive sport down here. We've had the odd Olympian over the years in the various disciplines. I mean, WWE Royal Rumble was on last week. Kind of completely different things all rolled into one, I know. But just in terms of what Islam does really well from a technique side of things, why are all these guys coming out of Dagestan so good?
I think it's the ability to chain different things together. So like sometimes, it's real easy to watch a fight. A guy shoots, unsuccessful, sprawl, and then there's separation. And they're like, oh, that guy shot for a takedown and he didn't get it. With Islam's style of wrestling, that Dagestani side of wrestling, like they can shoot and be unsuccessful and you won't even know it because it still leads to the takedown. Like they're able to go for one thing, and while you're defending that, then they move to the next thing before you even know what's happening. And just how strong they are because they live in the gym. I mean, the work ethic that I've seen from Khabib and now Islam, and it's just ingrained in that whole camp. All those Nurmagomedovs, Umar, Usman, that whole clan, they train in a way that you just don't see very often, and that just hardens them. Like they're just hard people, and when they get their hands on you, it's very, very hard to disengage them. So that I think is going to be the biggest challenge for Alex, is that once Islam grabs him, can he find a way to then defend that second move, that third move, that fourth move? If he's able to defend the first one, great, but there's more of them coming along the way,
You've covered fights all over the world. What do you think the value of home support is for Alex this week? It's not going to be the 57,000 or whatever we had at Marvel Stadium in Melbourne for Adesanya Whittaker. Probably going to be somewhere between, I think, 15 and 16,000 at RAC Arena in Perth. But they're going to be passionately cheering on the local boy. Does that shift this fight in either direction?
It's interesting, man. I mean, I've heard people describe the home field as a disadvantage, because then you're dealing with everybody asking for tickets, and and a lot of it comes with it. You're asked to promote it a lot more than the other guy because it's built around you. I think I don't really see it as being a factor. I think it's cool. I definitely love the fact that the fight is in Australia, and it kind of just landed that way. I think Volkanovski wanted this opportunity regardless of where it was, but then it was like, man, we're going back to Australia in February. Like, this is perfect. And then Islam wins the belt, gets his first title defense. So really just the timing of it came together beautifully. But if anything, maybe it's just like Volk is so confident. He's bulletproof in his mind right now, but maybe just kind of like, that feeling when you're just like, man, this is just meant to be. This was just meant to be. Like maybe he's got that feeling going into it, but I feel like he's got that feeling going into every single one.
Alex has spoken a lot about his desire to one day be the UFC GOAT. If he wins this week, he'll obviously join elite company. It's just the fifth fighter to be champ. Where do you think a win over Islam, upper weight class, puts him in that conversation moving forward?
It's kind of, I just talked about how the timing was so perfect. I guess it's not perfect in that regard for Alex, because if he beats Islam's not that established champ that has defended the belt 6-7 times. and we know how good he is, but maybe history will be like, oh, he beat Islam Makhachev, who was just on his first title defense, maybe not his 7th or 8th or something like that. But I mean, if I put like my personal historian hat on, Alex winning this, and then just the way in which he built on his individual performances against Max Holloway, who is an all-time great in himself, and then you just look at the statistics of Volk, the amount of rounds he's won. I mean, you can really dig into the stats of Alex, and you're like, wow, man, this guy really is one of the best to ever do it, just from a statistical standpoint. I mean, he is good at everything. And he's so active, too. He wants to be super active. So I think this would be huge. And I think, win or lose, I think Alex is going to continue to have plenty of success in the coming years. So I think he's going to put himself in the conversation. But yet, if he wants to really be in that upper, George, John, like if he wants to be in that tier, this would go a long, long way in that. A huge, huge long way.
Now I'm going to get a tip from you, but we'll come back to that maybe at the finish. Let's talk about some of the other fights coming up in Perth. Obviously, Josh Emmett and Yair Rodriguez for the interim featherweight strap. How do you see that one?
Super interesting, man. Very, very dangerous guys. Yair was one of those guys who kind of hit the scene red hot. The UFC has always really wanted Mexican talent to build up that market. And Yair just had that because he was able to do things that no one else really did. Like he was flashy, but there was purpose to what he did. And he's just devastating, man. I mean, when he hits guys with things they don't see coming, they really go down. I mean, you can make an easy case that he has the greatest knockout in UFC history with the Korean Zombie, in the final second. I mean, that's hard to top as greatest knockout of all time. So you just got the creativity and the danger factor of Yair. The question has kind of always been, really since he had his first loss in the UFC when he got really badly out-wrestled by Frankie Edgar, is can he deal with a wrestler? And if he were to win this fight against Josh Emmett and fight Alex Volkanovski, we're going to be talking about that a lot, because Alex will definitely take him down and beat him up if he can't defend the takedown. But Yair is super interesting, man. He's just always been a guy with the highest ceiling, and he's just fun to watch fight. And then Josh Emmett has been a guy who has had some ups and downs. He's had a little bit of injury. He's like just squeaked by in a big fight, so then maybe didn't get the biggest opportunity afterwards. But he is another guy, just danger factor. Huge power in his hands. And he's a veteran, man. He's a veteran. He's experienced. He probably is looking at this as, I got to get this done. I'm not going to get many more shots after this, So it's a high stakes fight with the potential for it to end very quickly.
Do you think either fighter has the tools to worry Alex in a featherweight proper fight?
I lean towards Yair because Yair does things that no one else does, And I think that if you're going to beat the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world, Alex Volkanovski, you got to surprise him somehow. I mean, we watched Max Holloway. We know how good of a fighter Max Holloway is, and Max was lost against Alex in that third fight. So I think it's going to take something to really shock Alex, something that really catches him off guard that he doesn't see, like an Ortega almost did. Like he was beating Ortega that whole fight, and then Ortega almost was able to get him with just that one X factor of his jiu-jitsu. Maybe Yair's X factor could be that creativity and that ability to hit him with something.
The card's obviously taken a couple of hits in the build-up. We would have loved to have seen Rob Whittaker and Paulo Costa go at it. Kaikara France also had to withdraw clearly with injury. So it's probably perhaps not looking as it did for the UFC a few months ago. But we get a look at Jack Della, Maddalena, who a lot of people are big on as the next big thing, I guess, from the UFC in this market. He was our 2022 ESPN Men's Rookie of the Year. Just what do you see in him and his fight this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, fireworks, Maddalena. Going around to these different events, you always have like, a manager or a coach be like, man, I got this guy. And this guy's like, I'm telling you, this guy's like really, really good. And his manager, Tim Simpson, told me about him back when he first was coming on to UFC. And he's like, I know, man, like because Maddalena's from Perth, right?
Yes.
And so is Tim. So he's like, I know he's from my hometown, and of course I'm gonna be biased, and I represent him, this and that. And he's like, bro, I'm telling you, like Maddalena, and obviously he's been on fire at 3-0, right? 3-0, just the knockouts that jump off the screen. I mean, as soon as he won his last fight, they had him, in the UFC room where they put together the fights. They just had him on this card versus TBD. It was like, well, Maddalena's fighting. He's got to be there, and so he's got the promotion behind him in a way that they see potential in him. and obviously the fans are coming around. You guys naming him Rookie of the Year like is no surprise. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big opportunity for him. And it's like, I mean, you say that about every single one of these fights. Like, they're all big opportunities. But yeah, of course, like I said, they knew that he was on this card the second he won his last fight. He's in a spot where they want to build him, and I think he wants to go out and take full advantage of that.
Is Randy Brown a step up in qualities that he's faced so far?
1,000,000%. Yeah, I really like Randy Brown. Randy was like he came onto the scene, and I think he was just a little green. Like if I'm remembering the start of his career correctly, he came off of looking for a fight with the Dana thing. Dana White's looking for a fight, and they liked him that night, and they signed him. But sometimes, when some of those guys have hit, but other ones that just they happen to impress Dana on that one night, but they're not ready for it. Yeah. I think Randy's a guy, not that he wasn't ready for the UFC, but just he wasn't one of those guys that really grabbed your attention immediately in the way that maybe Maddalena is. But he is right now. Like he is settled in, and he's really on a good momentum. So this is a tough fight for Maddalena. I mean, yes, it's like an opportunity for him to shine, but they didn't give him an easy fight to just say, oh yeah, go knock out somebody in Perth. Like Randy Brown's really good. So yes, this is a big step up.
Jimmy Crute's another intriguing fighter on this card in Perth. Was kind of on a similar trajectory, had big raps on him, kind of the next big thing from this corner of the world. Hit a bit of a roadblock first against Anthony Smith with that injury, and then one hell of a knockout from the now light heavyweight champion. What are you expecting from Jimmy in this fight? And can he get back to those levels where everyone thought he was the next big thing as well?
It's certainly, I'm not ready to give up on Jimmy at all. This is a fight where it's kind of like you asked me, what do I expect to see from Jimmy? I don't know. I don't know. Because like you said, he was on this trajectory where he looked like he was really, everything was going to fall into place. But then, Anthony Smith, and Anthony, very, very intelligent fighter, a veteran. It was one of those spots like it's not that crazy to say like, hey, Jimmy Crute could be the real deal, but he happened to come up short against a really smart, seasoned guy in Anthony. And then like you said, that knockout loss, it's like, well, that's the current champ, so it's not like he's losing these poor fights. But I think it was kind of the manner in which he lost them. Like they were quick,
Yep.
I know that he suffered the injury against Anthony, but Anthony was winning that fight up until that point. So it's like now it's kind of like time to reassess and ask yourself, what is Jimmy Crute? I do think that he has a ton of potential. I mean, you can look at the guy and look at his record, his resume, look at his highlight reels. Like this guy's got a lot of potential. But yeah, because of the ways in which his last two fights have gone, when he did step up in competition, he does need to kind of. The jury's out. We got to find out. This is like a big. We'll probably learn something about Jimmy Crute for this one.
What about then the rest of this 284 card? Tyson Pedro, perhaps keen to see him throw down again.
Mm-hmm. Of course, man. Tyson Pedro is very fun. He also, went through his thing where he dealt with injury and active. But just another guy, man. Sometimes you just get this feeling about guys where their brain catches up to their talent and it just meshes real well. And I feel like that's where Tyson is. He's just clicking. He's very confident. He's very comfortable when he's inside the octagon.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely looking forward to him fight.
We're not going to see Bam Bam in action, but what do you think we might see outside of the octagon from Bam Bam to Tuivasa this weekend?
Having himself a good time. I mean, even if he's fighting, he's usually on the side of the octagon having a good time. So it's always good to see. Always good to see Bam Bam. And yeah, man, it was like he rushed to get that last fight in last year. It would have been nice to maybe take a week off, bro. And then because what was the one? It was because he lost. Oh, it was to Sergey. Yeah, Sergey. So yeah, but I'm sure the cameras will find Ty wherever he is on fight night.
What about if we look away from 284 briefly to the middleweight division? Obviously, Izzy and Alex Pereira going to run it back in the coming months. How do you see that fight? Obviously, with the history now between the two of them, and where I guess it leaves Rob Whittaker.
Man, I really thought that they were going to put Khamzat Chimaev and Whittaker on the same card. I really, really thought that they were going to do that because Alex, I wouldn't say he has trouble making weight, but everyone knows that he cuts a lot of weight.
Yep.
And the UFC likes to have sort of insurance policies.
Yep.
And when Rob unfortunately missed out on this card with Paulo, they were looking at potentially Chimaev because Chimaev has trouble making 170. So it's like, well, this is a good scenario. Let's put them together. So quite frankly, I was kind of surprised that they didn't make that fight, and maybe it was just timing of Chimaev or whatnot. But I don't know, man. I mean, if Izzy wins against Pereira, I mean, you're talking about maybe they do another one between them, or if they don't, even though Izzy just lost, like, he still really can't do the Robert Whittaker fight again.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think Rob's probably hoping Alex wins, and I know that he's kind of just waiting for a fight. I hit him up when they announced that Alex Izzy fight with the same question you just asked me. Like, okay, so what about you, Rob? And he's just like, I don't know, man. He's like, he actually wrote back, and the people who are fans of Rob will can hear him say this. He's like, I might be in trouble, mate. He's just like, they might have forgot about me over here, you know. They'll find something for him, but yeah, it's kind of unclear right now. But I do think I still haven't kind of given up the idea that they're going to match him with Chimaev. I just think Chimaev is going to end up at 185. That to me makes the most sense. Yep. And so if he does, and when he does, who's he going to fight? I think it's Robert Whittaker. So that right now would be my guess as to Rob's next fight, but we'll see, because I would have thought they would have put it on April.
We mentioned it earlier, massive news over the weekend with Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler to be the tough coaches and then fight at the back end. What does this mean for the UFC? We know he's such, the dominant personality in the sport still. But is this, the start of the end for Conor in a way, or is he going to come back and be bigger than ever?
It's hard to say that it's the start of the end, because if Conor went out and looked good against Michael Chandler and beat him, would that shock anybody? I expect Chandler to be the favorite. He's been more active. He's got the wrestling. But, the start of the end, you could make the argument that the start of the end for Conor was the night he beat Eddie Alvarez and he was on top of the world. He's won one fight since then. Honestly, I really think the start of the end for Conor, as we knew him at the time, was the Floyd Mayweather fight. I think that just kind of ruined him as a fighter. And I say that, obviously respectfully. He made the right decision for him and his family. He made a ton of money. But as far as, our hope of seeing him reach his maximum potential as a fighter, I think that was the beginning of the end, is when he took that Floyd Mayweather fight. But I look at him coming back and coaching tough as potential positive. He comes back, he gets structure in his life. He's around the fight game. He's around young, hungry fighters, you would imagine, with the Ultimate Fighter. And it makes him want that, because when he fought Floyd in, 2017, when he fought Floyd, that was the one thing. It was just like, well, is he going to still want this now? And I think he has wanted it, but there's a difference between wanting it after you've made that $100 million payday, and then when you're coming up, and you haven't won that championship yet. So if enough time has gone by, and like now he's used to the money and everything, and he wants it, and he finds that desire in Vegas doing the reality show and then fighting Michael Chandler, then no, like this could be the start of something great. He knocks out Michael Chandler. Who's to say, and it fights 170 pounds, who's to say they don't say, oh, you want a title fight at 170, you want to drop down to 155? That the UFC is going to give him the opportunities. So if he gets motivated and he looks good against Michael Chandler, once again, the world is completely open to him. But it's all kind of dependent on him, and I think just that motivation, that desire to go in and do it.
Yeah, I think if I'd made $100 million, I'd be on a beach somewhere in the Pacific. So
yeah,
not going to throw stones.
You wouldn't see me fighting like Khabib Nurmagomedov and Dustin Poirier twice, with a bad leg. You would not see me in there.
Brett, we've been starved of UFC action down here the past 3 years, and clearly we've got the number one pound-for-pound fighter, Izzy from New Zealand, Oceania. The whole region's just on a bit of a tear right now. What have you seen from, this part of the world, and how big can it get? Is this potentially the biggest market for the UFC outside the States?
Yeah, it's up there. We've seen different regions go through cycles. It really depends on who emerges, man. It really does. Brazil had this huge rise, and that was behind Aldo, and that was behind, some of those early guys in the sport, Anderson Silva, obviously, but they had so much talent. Yep. When you think about the early years of this sport, Brazil was kind of one of the front runners, and then Canada blew up because of George St. Pierre. Yep. And then you saw the UK market Bisping, just explode with Bisping, but then Conor, and now they've got Paddy Pimblett and Tom Aspinall, and so it's really built around the characters and the talent. But this place obviously has a ton of talent. You guys are like a little bit of a fighting culture, You like the rough sports, So if the region continues to develop talent, if some of these young guys like the Maddalenas and the Jimmy Crute still. If they pop, and they win a championship, then there's a huge potential for this market.
Well, Creed 3 is just about to hit cinemas in the coming weeks. Brett Okamoto, let's talk about some unconventional training styles in the UFC and perhaps how that compares with Creed 3.
Yeah, this is one of these questions where I feel like I'm going to be sitting on a plane, later this week or something and be like, oh, that's one. Because I know I've seen them, but just to come off of the top of my head. Obviously, Khabib Nurmagomedov wrestling with bears comes to mind. That's pretty unconventional. The other guy who comes to mind, of course, when you're talking about unconventional ways to prepare for a fight is Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson is complete animal when it comes to training, and he has his own way of doing it. Like, the one reason why Tony has always kind of never been part of a traditional camp or a traditional coaches is because Tony believes that Tony knows best. And I have seen that guy. I literally sat in his gym and filmed him doing this, taking a metal pole and just repeatedly elbowing the metal pole because he believes it makes his blades sharper, is what he says.
Takes a special type of person to do that.
Yes. I mean, like bang, bang, bang. And he does that he goes up to Big Bear, which is at elevation in the U.S., and he'll do a lot of training up there. I mean, when this guy had to pull out of the Khabib fight one time, one of the 5 times, the most cursed fight ever, it's because he had blood in his lungs from training too hard. Tony Ferguson comes up with some pretty amazing ways to prepare for a fight.
Nate Diaz running full triathlons every day.
Yep. Nate doing that as well. It's like I've been at Sean O'Malley's house, and before he was making a lot of money, because I think he's got a nicer setup now, but it's just like a big old freezer box that you put your meat in during like when you want to hang on to it for a while.
Yep.
And he's emptied that out, and then he gets in there and kloses. It's like that's what these guys do to prepare to get ready.
Sadly, I don't think Alex mixing it with a koala is going to quite compare to Khabib doing it with the bears, mate. Thank you very much, and Creed 3 in cinemas soon. Check out the trailer.
You don't remember me, huh? We was like brothers. Damien. I was the best, though. Man, I never got a chance to prove that. Try spending half your life in a cell, watching somebody else live your life. I'm coming for everything. You threatening me? No, we past talking.
Then maybe you just have to find him.
Do what I gotta do. Some of my methods you might disagree with me. These are family ties. I recognize mine. I know that they needed me.
All right, Brett, let's come back for some tips then this weekend, UFC 284 in Perth, the main event. Volk and Islam, who you got and why?
Oh, man. I mean, it's hard not to say Islam. It really is. It's just difficult because just like it was really hard not to say Khabib every time, because until you see someone deal with that type of style, until you see someone look comfortable against it, then you always have this sense that they're going to be uncomfortable against it. Like I think Islam brings something to the table more so than Alex does, in the sense of Alex hasn't seen what Islam is bringing. Islam's kind of seen certain variables of what Alex is bringing. Alex just does them really, really incredibly well. So I'm going to have to go with Islam just because of that ability to dictate where the fight goes and the size. I mean, we are, like, let's not sweep that under the rug. Size doesn't always matter, but you're talking about Islam, who is a full size lightweight. Like, he told me before he won the title, and he said this now in multiple interviews, that he does plan on going up to welterweight. When Kamaru was the champion and those two were close, but he's like, when Kamaru leaves and he retires, like, I'm going to go up and win a championship at welterweight. And dude, he'll look fine size-wise at that. You've seen the photos of these two next to each other. Islam is a lot bigger. So with the wrestling and the size and everything else, I got to go with Islam. But I will say, like, if Alex goes out there and is just superb and fights brilliantly and just checks every single box, I will not be shocked. I will not be shocked, dude, because this guy does everything just perfectly well. Like, you can talk about different guys, what makes them special. Like, oh, Islam's wrestling, or like Kamaru's wrestling, or, just like different things make different people. Like Conor's ability to perform in the big moment and land the big shot. Like, Alex is just perfect. Alex is just like the perfect fighter. He doesn't make mistakes. He knows what the other guy's trying to do. He distance manages. I mean, he's just playing chess all the time, Alex. So if he wins, I will not be surprised. But that's a very long-winded way of saying I have to lean
I'm on Islam.
Yeah.
The co-main then, Josh Emmett and Yair Rodriguez.
I'm going to go with Yair for the reasons I was saying earlier. I think he's just a little more unpredictable. He also is another guy, like, I know we didn't get really see much of him at all when he fought Brian Ortega, but I was around him that week and then afterwards, and I also think he's another one of those guys that just is real comfortable with who he is right now. And he's matured Like earlier in his UFC career, he's a little immature. I think like he's just real comfortable now. And I think that guy, when he's clicking on all cylinders, he is a pretty big problem. Josh is great. No glaring holes and a lot of power, but I think just that extra little gear of Yair, it makes me want to pick him.
And finally, who's going to give us the wow moment then in Perth? Who's going to give us the headline knockout?
I mean, I guess I gotta make everybody happy and say Maddalena, right? But that is a tough fight, dude. I mean, that's a really, really intriguing fight. I'm high on Randy Brown. I think Randy Brown's really good. In a way, I was almost a little surprised that they put that fight together because I was like, well, they're going to put Maddalena in Perth and get him a sweet knockout, in front of his home crowd. Yep. And then, they're putting him with Randy. Like, Randy's good, dude. So I'm really, really looking forward to that fight. And if Maddalena knocks him out, like that's a big statement.
Well, mate, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you here in Sydney. I know it's only a brief stopover, but have a fantastic time in Perth, and we'll look forward to